Ayman Khan here for Seconds Out with Hall of Fame writer Thomas Hauser. Thomas, good to be in your company once more. How's life?
Life is good. Watched a very good heavyweight championship fight last weekend, and it's sunny here today in New York, so I'm happy. And I've started working on a new book, a novel about Sherlock Holmes, which is keeping me invigorated.
There you go. I'm sure there's much to delve into when it comes to Sherlock Holmes. But before we move into some of the boxing talk, let's talk about the book that you've got out at the moment. That's your well, for me to say, probably my mother and me, but it's your mother, of course. I just wonder what it was like writing this novel, and I just read before or listened to beforehand that your mother told you to not make her out to be a saint. Going through some of the maybe not so shinier sides of your mother's life, what was that like? And then putting that onto paper.
Well, first, just one slight correction. It's not a novel. Novels are fiction, and this is nonfiction. This is all true. My mother, as you pointed out, said, "Don't make me out to be a saint. You should put in the things I did wrong too." And look, did I put in everything that everybody in the family did wrong? No, nor did I put in everything that I ever did wrong. But I think I give a well-rounded picture of my mother, and I think she'd be very pleased with the end result. One of the things that was very gratifying to me was I did an interview on radio a week ago, and the interviewer began the interview by saying that he had read the book and then noted that Thomas Hauser has written biographies of Muhammad Ali and his mother, and having read My Mother and Me, I can say that Ali is in good company. So that was very nice. And I think probably Ali would agree with that. He and my mother got along quite well.
Well, speaking of legendary heavyweights, we may have one now gracing in the same company in the form of Oleksandr Usyk. It was Usyk who came through with the undisputed heavyweight crown, defeating Tyson Fury via points on the judges' scorecards. Thomas, I'll let you take the floor. Tell me what you saw in that fight with Usyk being crowned the heavyweight champion.
Well, first, I thought it was a very good fight. The stakes involved obviously gave it added drama. We're not talking about Ali Frazier 3 in Manila, but you're not talking about Ali Frazier 3 in Manila with any other fight either. It was a good fight. I was wrong going in. I thought that Fury was going to simply be too big and strong for Usyk to handle, in addition to Tyson's skills. It's certainly possible that he slipped a bit. One of the things that struck me as very odd about the fight was that Fury had this huge advantage in size. My expectation, and the expectation of most people, I believe, was that he was going to go in there and rough Usyk up, lean on him, shake him on the inside, throw him around the ring. And instead, for most of the fight, Tyson fought like the smaller man. I don't know if you recall, but certainly in the early rounds, Usyk was advancing and Tyson was moving away, circling, jabbing, not engaging at all, to the point where literally 45 seconds into the fight, the crowd started booing. You forget the boos now because it was a very good fight, but that was there in the first round and in several rounds later on. It's really hard to measure these heavyweights today. And you and I have talked about this before. We all thought, at least I thought, Tyson Fury was the real thing. And then he had this dreadful performance against Ngannou, and I don't think looked particularly good against Usyk. Usyk struggled in his early heavyweight fights, against Witherspoon and Chisora, which I guess is understandable, getting acclimated to a new weight division, but he certainly didn't look that good against Daniel Dubois. And look, if you flip one round on one judge's scorecard, we'd be talking about Tyson Fury as the undisputed four-belt heavyweight champion of the world right now. And similarly, if you flip around on a scorecard in Usyk Joshua 2, that fight would have been a draw. So these fighters are really very close together. Do I think that Usyk is a legitimate Hall of Fame fighter? Absolutely. Do I think he was a great cruiserweight? Absolutely. It's very hard to get clarity in today's heavyweight division, but right now he deserves to be called the heavyweight champion of the world.
Just to have this on record, what was your scorecard if you scored it?
Good question. I thought it was a very difficult fight to score. To my mind, and I wasn't at the fight live, I scored it off the stream, but I had a good large picture. I thought there were 5 rounds that Fury clearly won, 4 rounds that Usyk clearly won, and 3 that were up for grabs. Now, of those 3 that were up for grabs, I found a way to give 1 to Fury and 1 to Usyk, and I called 1 even. I'm not opposed to scoring even rounds. If a
Mm.
judge can't decide who won a fight, he shouldn't make it up and say, well, I'll, balance that off with a close round later in the fight. So my scorecard was even. 6-5 1 in rounds for Fury, with the knockdown evening it up. Do I have a problem with 114, 113 for either guy? Absolutely not.
Let's go to some of the points of contention then when it comes to it. First of all, that ninth round, uh, a tremendous onslaught from Oleksandr Usyk. He seemed to break through after having some early success. I think it was a round or two before. A bothersome left hook really seemed to affect Tyson Fury. That paid dividends in the ninth. Now, some people are debating online as to the referee and when maybe he could have called a knockdown, or maybe even going as far as to call the fight off. Look, it's clear to see that it was a case of it's not a standing 8 count. It's the ropes were deemed to have held Tyson Fury up in this situation, but of the refereeing and of the fight maybe being called off at that point, what do you feel was what do you think of the referee's actions?
I thought the referee handled it properly. Uh, the first few times Fury went into the ropes, certainly he was leaning against them, he had staggered against them, but it wasn't a certainty that he would have gone down if the ropes hadn't been there. When Mark Nelson called the knockdown, and you correctly said that it was not a standing 8 count, it was a knockdown, the ropes clearly held Fury up. It was the proper call. The fact that Tyson recovered, went the distance, and won at least 1 round after that, was really competitive for the rest of the fight, showed that it was the right call. And for the people who say, well, he gave Fury a little too much time after the 8 count so he could recover, he didn't give him all that much time. He wanted to know if he could hold his hands up and step forward, which is common in boxing. And then the bell rang, which would have negated the possibility of Usyk doing further damage. So I think the referee acted properly. I also, going back in time, I thought the referee acted properly in calling a low blow in Usyk against Daniel Dubois. And it's sort of interesting that those 2 referee controversies even out with Usyk's fans, because, of course, there are people who say Usyk should have been counted out in the Dubois fight, which I don't believe. I think it was clearly a low blow. And if you look at how it landed, jamming the protective cup up into the crown jewels, it was a damaging low blow. So
I
no
was
problem. Referee. I thought overall Mark Nelson did a very good job with the fight.
I was very surprised to see Tyson Fury so visibly hurt and so visibly wobbling around the ring in fights where he's fought one of the biggest punchers in history in the form of Deontay Wilder 3 times, and he's taken those big hits on the chin and never looked that bad in the ring. I was surprised to see Fury that way from Usyk, who he outweighed by some 20, 30 pounds. You mentioned in one of your previous answers there that you felt maybe Tyson's showing some signs of slipping there. Do you feel that's a reason as to why Fury's punch resistance didn't hold in that fight?
Well, okay, I think first he looked pretty damaged to me in the first Wilder fight. I'm still amazed that he got up. If you and I put on a video of the first Fury Wilder fight, If you go to round 12 when Tyson's knocked down, if you say to me, do you think he's getting up? I'd say not a chance. So
Mm.
it was amazing that he got up from that. And of course, he was knocked down twice in the third fight. That said, Wilder is a huge puncher. Usyk is not a big puncher. Uh, and look, it's quite as fighters get older, as they get hit, as they get concussed a couple of times. And we all know that Tyson was certainly concussed in the first Wilder fight, and probably in the third. When you get concussed a couple of times, you're more prone to getting knocked out, not to mention brain damage you might suffer later on. So it could be that Fury doesn't have the same punch resistance that he once had. Could also be that Usyk is punching harder now and he landed a perfect shot.
The other point of contention now in the fallout that's being discussed is the Fury corner, which consisted of, in the main, John Fury, his father, Andy Lee, and Sugar Hill Stewart. And for some, there seems to appear to be conflicting messages, especially as to the final two rounds, as to how to game plan and strategize for getting the win. Have you had a chance to have a look at the corner, and do you feel that maybe Fury's thoughts were somewhat conflicted, considering some of the messages he was getting from the corner?
I did not hear the corner instructions, so I can't comment on them. One of the unappealing things about this fight was even asking customers, certainly in the United States, to pay a lot of money, a lot more than in the UK for the pay-per-view. They showed us commercials in between some of the rounds.
Unlucky there. I don't think we quite got those commercials over here in the UK. Okay, moving forward then. Yeah, so you've said there that you had the fight scored a draw. I guess then logical thing for your mind you'd want to see is the immediate rematch, which is what has been exercised there by Fury.
Sure, I think a rematch makes sense. It was a good fight between two people, each of whom had a claim to part of the heavyweight championship of the world. I'm really not interested in Usyk fighting the winner of Hrgovic and Dubois. I think the IBF should be ashamed of itself if it strips Usyk of their belt, which will become their phony belt, if he doesn't fight the mandatory immediately. And, the Saudis can solve this problem very quickly, which is the Saudis can say, if the IBF strips Usyk, we will not have anything to do with any fighter or promoter who is involved with a fight for the phony IBF belt. And on top of that, except in unusual circumstances, we have no interest in hosting IBF title fights here in Saudi Arabia in the future. And if they really stick to that, wait and see how fast Usyk gets an exception to defend against Fury. Because let's face it, people in boxing follow the money. And if you take the financial incentive away from anybody who's involved in that nonsensical fight, it won't happen.
The other direction.
So I will add the thought that with all the money on the table, for Fury and Usyk and their rematch, it seems reasonable to me that the fighters could pay Hrgovic a step-aside fee that would be as much as he'd make for fighting Dubois.
The other direction that was on the table, though clearly seems off now, was potentially that Fury might take an interim fight with Anthony Joshua before he then rematched Oleksandr Usyk. Was that something you were interested in?
I don't think that's a good fight for Tyson, particularly if he's not taking punches well. Anthony Joshua seems to be recovering. Whatever you say about his mindset, he is a hellacious puncher. And to me, that's not the fight for Tyson. It might be the fight for Anthony Joshua. I think there are two fights for Tyson Fury. One is the immediate rematch against Usyk, who he should be able to beat if he fights a more aggressive fight. Or the other would be to take sort of an easy warm-up fight. But again, if I was making the decisions for Tyson Fury, And I probably wouldn't make them until he'd, had a little time to recuperate from the ordeal he just went through. The ordeal being not just the fight, but the training camp. I'd say you do one of two things. Either you fight the rematch or you retire. And if you retire this time, stay retired. Fury himself alluded to that in a post-fight interview where he said, and I forget the exact words, but what do I want to be 100 years old, sitting in a wheelchair? He's aware of the damage that fighting causes. He's gotten hit a lot. Certainly Deontay Wilder whacked him with some pretty good shots to the head. Usyk whacked him to the head a lot. This takes a toll. And the most insidious thing about brain damage is that you don't really know it's there until it's too late to do anything about late in the game when the toll has started to show. So I think Tyson should either fight the rematch, from his point of view, hopefully regain the title, and then go from there. I also have to add at this point that it's very hard to begrudge Oleksandr Usyk his victory. First, everything he has done in the ring throughout his career has been a credit to boxing. And more importantly, his win is a very important symbol for the people of Ukraine who are fighting a heroic battle against a much larger, more powerful foe. And to the extent that Usyk's victory brings some sense of joy and resolve to the Ukrainian people, to me, that's very good.
Echo those words there. Can I ask you just to elaborate there on the thought of Fury and AJ? You feel that AJ would step in as the favorite in that fight if those two did meet?
Well, there's two separate issues. The first is who would be favored, which reflects simply where the public is putting its money. And then the other question is who do people on the inside think would win? Well, people on the inside in boxing thought Fury would beat Usyk. So you have to take all of our opinions with a grain of salt. My guess is that right now, as far as the sports books are concerned, Joshua would probably be favored going in. He seems to have righted the sinking ship. On the other hand, Fury presents problems for AJ that AJ has never had to face in an opponent before. I mean, don't tell me, well, Robert Hellenius is big and AJ knocked him out. Fury is a whole different kettle of fish. So, would it be an interesting fight? Yes. Would it be in Joshua's interest to have that fight now? Yes. I don't think it's in Fury's interest to have that fight now.
Zoning in back on Oleksandr Usyk. Look, outside of the rematch with Fury, and of course because that rematch is caveated on the idea that Usyk does want to continue. He does have the option to retire. How viable do you feel is that, and what really left is there after the rematch with Fury on the basis that Usyk would win that rematch?
Well, the drug of the sport, as Lennox Lewis once said, is there's always somebody else to fight. Oleksandr Usyk has said that he wants to fight until age 40. I'd just as soon not see that because I'd like to see most fighters retire before the age of 40, Bernard Hopkins being the notable exception. He's had a great career. He has reached the mountaintop. If he keeps fighting, he's going to lose eventually. We all know that. But at this point, he has earned the right to make the decision. I assume that anybody would fight him because the heavyweight championship of the world is involved, and we'll see what he decides to do next. Obviously, if Fury wants the rematch, Usyk is contractually obligated to fight that fight. If Fury, for some reason, were to not exercise his contractual right to the rematch, then I suppose Usyk would fight the winner of Hrgovic and Dubois.
Hypothetically, let's say Usyk was to hang up the gloves now. He's achieved cruiserweight undisputed, heavyweight undisputed. Now the conversation opens up to those generational matchups where we kind of look to compare them against some of the other heavyweight greats. Where does he rank amongst all the other heavyweight legends, the ones that you've seen with your own eye, the ones that you've had the chance to have conversations with as well too. Where would you put Usyk in amongst those?
Okay, first, I don't put a whole lot of credibility in the idea of undisputed four-belt heavyweight champion. The belts have become so devalued at this point. And you have these ridiculous mandatories with the sanctioning bodies. You have titles that have been vacated and won by fighters who really are not very good. They're not world class. They're solid club fighters. So forget about undisputed and all that other nonsense. What I give credit to Usyk for is that he beat Anthony Joshua twice and Tyson Fury once. Two of those three fights were very close and could have gone either way. And one of the things you have to do is ask yourself how good these heavyweights really are. Is this heavyweight era better than when we had, Bruno, Selden, and Botha holding what were then the three major championship belts? Absolutely. Are these Ali, Frazier, Foreman, and Holmes? Absolutely not. So let's give Usyk credit for being a spectacular fighter. You also have to keep in mind, of course, that athletes are just bigger today. Usyk fought Fury at 223 pounds and is considered a small heavyweight. When big, hulking, monstrous George Foreman fought Joe Frazier in Jamaica the first time to claim the heavyweight championship of the world, and we all remember how huge and awesome George was in that fight, he weighed 217 pounds, 6 pounds less than Usyk weighed when he went into the ring against Tyson Fury. So you really have to judge athletes in the context of their own time. Now, take somebody like Evander Holyfield, who today probably with everything that's going on, Evander would go into the ring at a comparable size to Usyk. Muhammad Ali weighed 206 pounds when he beat Sonny Liston the first time. He'd be a feather, but of course in today's world, Ali would be bigger and heavier and stronger. So, it's hard to judge athletes in the context of history. You have to look at them in the context of their time. Certain heavyweights have a special place in history because of what they did in their time. We can look at Lennox Lewis and say he was the best heavyweight of his era, and I believe would have been competitive with, not would have beaten, but would have been competitive with any fighter of all time. I still question whether Usyk could have stayed with some of the better heavyweights, bigger punchers in boxing history, but that's all water cooler talk. There's no way we can know the answer to that. So let's appreciate Usyk for what he is now.
Completely agree. And if at minimum he's put himself in a discussion with that water cooler talk, I'm sure he'll be happy with that. But most of all, congratulations to him for securing the undisputed heavyweight titles. Thomas, it's been a pleasure speaking to you once again. Looking forward again to the next conversation. Thank you for speaking to Seconds Out, sir.
I always enjoy it. Thank you.